Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. This video is one that I'm super excited to finally be making for you guys. This is a video all about how I studied for the NCLEX. So I took the NCLEX-RN, let's see, 9 days ago, and if you haven't watched my vlogs where I vlogged the entire process, I will link them up here. You can go check them out, but I did pass on my first attempt, and I can't believe I've been a registered nurse for almost 10 days. That's kind of crazy, and I know that sounds so silly, but it doesn't feel real. It hasn't felt real this whole time. It still doesn't feel real. It's totally crazy. My DMs have been blowing up with questions about how I studied for this test, so this video is going to be all about that. I'm going to try to go as in depth as I possibly can, give you all the information that you need in order for you to be successful, and kind of let you know what worked for me, what didn't, and just go from there. If you get through the end of this video and you feel like you still have questions or things that I left unanswered, please leave a comment down below and I will definitely get back to you, or you can always send me a direct message on Instagram. I will link my Instagram right here so that you can give me a follow and send me a message if there's anything you need. So I'm going to initially start off with my last semester, the last few days of my last semester of nursing school. So when I graduated, it was during the whole pandemic situation that was going on in the world, and so my school shut down early. We got sent home, we moved to online, and honestly my last semester of nursing school was pretty chill. I'm not gonna lie. All of my hard classes were done, like med-surg, ICU nursing, all that hard stuff was the semester before, so my last semester was really just focused on studying for the NCLEX anyway, with a couple like extra assignments here and there. So I had finished pretty much all my assignments within the first week of being at home and moving to online, just because there wasn't a lot going on, to be honest. So I started studying before I graduated. Now, if your program isn't like mine, if you're in your really intense classes towards the end of your program and you can't really like be studying for the NCLEX at the same time, I totally get that. If I had had harder classes, I probably wouldn't have been studying as early as I was. Obviously, you got to do what's best for you, but that's just what was going on in my situation and was what worked best for me. So do whatever works for you, start whenever's best for you. But I started studying, I think, the last week of March. And one of the requirements for my, I think it was Transition to Readiness course, it was one of my final courses, was to create a schedule for the NCLEX and a schedule to study. This is 100% my first tip. I totally recommend making a calendar. So initially I did it on my computer, and I just went into like, I think I just googled blank calendar template, and I used Canva. If you don't know what Canva is, it's a free website you can use. So I went into Canva and I just built my own calendar, and initially I started off with just a blank slate. So I did April, May, and June, and I was planning to test in July, which now you guys know I tested in May, so drastically different than what my calendar looked like, and I'll talk about that later. So I built out a calendar for April, May, and June, and then a little bit into July, because I was planning to test in July. At first, I started by just putting in the most important dates. So if I had a graduation ceremony, I put that in, which that got canceled, but still the day of graduation I put in there. I put my pinning ceremony that was supposed to happen in there. That didn't happen either, but it was an important day, so I put that in there. Any job interviews, any dates that were application windows opening for new grad programs, application windows closing for new grad programs, birthdays, Connors deployment, like anything that was important to me and were going to be days that were probably days that I wouldn't want to study, or just important dates to be aware of. I put all of those in first because those were concrete, those weren't changing, and those were things that I could mold my study plan around. So I started with that, put all the important dates down first, and then kind of moved from there with studying. So I decided the best way for me to study was a way that made sense to me in my brain. I think whatever way makes sense to you, or what you think will work best for you, is what you should do. Just because this worked for me doesn't mean it will work for you. So I followed this girl on YouTube, and like I said in my NCLEX vlogs, I watched every NCLEX prep video or vlog that I could find on the internet, basically. I found this video where this girl was talking about how she studied, and she broke it up initially in the lifespan. So she started with like conception of a baby and like getting pregnant and like how much folic acid a mom needs and like expectations week by week throughout pregnancy and all of that, and then moved her way through like labor, delivery, caring of a newborn, pediatrics, and then into adults and like end of life care and all of that. So I took what she said because I thought that made complete sense to me, and just kind of rearranged it. So I started with antepartum, which is like beginning of pregnancy, conception, all of that stuff. and then worked my way through the stages of pregnancy and the expectations, and when you should hear the heartbeat on like a Doppler versus an ultrasound, and when they should expect to feel kicking and all that kind of stuff. And then I moved on to the laboring process and the delivery, and then I moved on to postpartum and newborn care, and then I moved on to pediatrics. And with pediatrics, I tied in mental health because I felt like teenagers and mental health just kind of go one and the same. From peds, I moved into adults, and once I got into adults, I broke up the body systems in like a head to toe fashion and included pharmacology with that. So I literally started from the top, so the brain, and did neuro and just worked my way down. So I did neuro, skin, heart and lungs, GI, GU, literally just down the entire body. And anytime there were medications that went with those body systems, I would study those as well. And then I moved on to like end of life hospice care. And then at the very end, I included all the little extra stuff. So like leadership and management, delegation, prioritization, those kind of extra things. That's how I planned out my studying. So my goal initially, when I made my calendar to test in July, was to do like 50 to 75 questions, not every day, probably like 3 to 5 days a week. It was pretty spread out. I was giving myself a lot of free time, and the reason why I did this initially is because I didn't know when I was going to be able to test, and I felt like it was safer to plan a calendar around potentially not being able to test for a while than planning to be able to test right away, because I just didn't know what it was going to look like normally. And then especially with the pandemic, it totally changed things too and made scheduling a little bit more complicated. So I didn't want to take the risk that I wasn't able to study, or I wasn't able to test as early as I wanted to, and I built my whole calendar around that. I felt like if I planned it for further out and I ended up being able to study sooner or test sooner, sorry, I keep messing up, if I were able to test sooner, then I could just rewrite the calendar to fit that, but I wanted to have a lot of wiggle room. So that's what I did. I just built the calendar like that, and I wrote in, like, starting from day 1, 50 antepartum questions, 50 labor questions, 50 mom-baby questions, literally just all the way through the lifespan. And I would only do one section at a time. So I would do all of my antepartum questions together, and then all of my labor questions, and all of my peds questions, and so on and so forth. I didn't really mix them. So that's kind of what I did just leading up to the end of my semester. And then I think it was April 1st, I bought UWorld, and I decided that initially I didn't want to buy it, to be honest with you. My school provided us with Kaplan, and so I had resources from Kaplan. I had practice questions and practice exams from them, but I didn't love Kaplan. I'm going to be completely honest. This is just my experience. You might have a different experience, and that's fine. But initially, I just felt like Kaplan didn't provide the rationales that I needed and the explanation that I needed as to why certain questions were right or wrong. So I did my research, I posted on my Instagram, and I asked you guys what you thought and how you studied for the NCLEX if you had taken it. And literally everyone told me that they use UWorld and were obsessed with it. I didn't get one single bad review about UWorld. Everybody said it was amazing, and I'd already been hearing this, so I was already like kind of interested in it, but I really didn't want to spend money when I'd already spent money on all this Kaplan stuff with my school. So I was kind of hesitant, but I went onto their website, and they had a, what would you call it, like a trial of a couple questions that you could do, and it was probably like 10 to 20 questions or so, I don't know. And I literally did like 2 of them, and I wanted to buy it because the rationale was insane. I was so shocked. The graphics that were put with the questions, you could make flashcards from the questions, you could mark them to go back later to study them. There were full-on paragraph explanations in the rationale, opposed to Kaplan like maybe gave you a sentence. Maybe. I was immediately hooked just because I wanted the rationales, and I felt like those alone were amazing. So I decided to buy UWorld, but I picked the one that had the QBake, and it had 1 practice exam. The practice exam is 100 questions. I think you have 3 hours to take it or something. It's supposed to give you an indication of like their thoughts on your likelihood of passing. It's not adaptive, so it's a little bit different than the actual NCLEX. Opposed to the NCLEX adapts its question, so if you answer a question wrong, it gives you an easier question. If you answer a question right, it gives you a harder question, and so on and so forth. This test didn't do that, which is fine, but that's what the test was. That's kind of when I started studying. I just started doing practice questions just like I told you in the order that I explained. I went through and I did the math with how many questions there were. I would then look at, okay, how many antepartum specifically questions were. Say there were 200, then I would do 75 a day until all 200 were done, and then I would move on to the next category. I started doing that until April 28th, and I got a decent chunk through my questions. Some days I would do 75 questions, some days I would do like 200 to 300. It honestly just depended on what I had going on and like how I felt like my mental capacity was doing, because some days were easier than others. That's why I recommend making a calendar, because I really think doing that helped me and helped hold me accountable and get what I needed to get done on time for the test. I was doing all of those until April 28th, and on April 28th I got my ATT, which if you don't know what ATT is, that is your authorization to test number, and that's the number you get from the state that allows you to register for the NCLEX. So I got that on April 28th, and that's when I decided to schedule my test. So that day I scheduled my test for May 10th. Once I had my test scheduled, I decided to make a new calendar. So obviously I was no longer testing in July and I'd moved my date up a crap ton. I probably wouldn't have scheduled my test that close if I didn't feel ready or didn't feel like I'd done enough studying, but I was so far ahead in my study calendar for the test date in July that I'd originally made, because I was doing 75 to 200 questions a day and not really taking days off, to be completely honest, that moved me farther along in my study calendar, and I didn't feel like I needed to wait till June or July. Obviously, pick a date that works for you and you think gives you enough time to study for, but also isn't pushing it off super far, if that makes sense. I decided to rewrite my calendar, and at that point I was into the adult health section of studying, and so I rewrote my calendar by going into UWorld and seeing how many questions I had left, and then I did the math and just divided the questions by the number of days I had left between the date that I scheduled my test and the day I was taking my test, which I think was like 13 or 14 days, so that I would finish the 2,000 question Q bank. And to be honest, by the time May 10th rolled around, I started studying the end of March. So I'd been studying for almost 2 months, like a month and a half at that point, so that is a decent amount of time. So I made that new calendar and just kind of studied from there, doing practice questions. Now I do want to move into the topic of what resources I used. I have talked about UWorld and I did all of those practice questions, but there are other things that I did as well. So like I said in the beginning, my school provided me with Kaplan, 3 CAT exams, which CAT exams or CAT exams are computer adaptive tests, is what CAT stands for. So it mimics the NCLEX. It'll give you the minimum, which is 75 typically when you're not in a pandemic, 75 or 265 questions, and it adapts to how you're answering, and then when it shuts you off, it tells you if it thinks you have like a maybe chance of passing, a really poor chance of passing, or a really good chance of passing. I took all 3 of those and I just kind of mixed those into my calendar with the test questions that I was doing. And the first one, I got all 265 and I failed, and it was like, you have a really low chance of passing. The second one and the third one, or the second one I passed in 75 questions, so the minimum. And I took that one 2 weeks after I'd been using UWorld, so that just goes to show that UWorld was super helpful and bumped up my Kaplan score like a ton, which is awesome. And then the third test that I did was, I passed in like 130, I think. I didn't use Kaplan's Q bank at all. Kaplan also had like a couple different readiness exams. I only took one of them. I think I got a 70% on it, and I've been told that getting 60s or above is what you want, and that's like a good indicator that you'll pass the NCLEX. So I got a 70% on that, and that made me feel good. I took that the day before the NCLEX, and I should not have done that. I do not recommend that. I really think that that played a huge role into my anxiety going into the test. I think that my brain was just exhausted, and everyone says to not study the day before the test, but I didn't listen to them. So please listen when I'm telling you to not study the day before the test, because I should have done that. Like, I shouldn't have studied, but I just couldn't. Like, I just felt wrong not studying, but I shouldn't have done it. So if you take anything from this video, don't study the day before your test. Just like give your brain a mental break, because I didn't do that and I really wish that I had. I think it would have like allowed me to just feel more confident and focused in the test. That's what I did with Kaplan. And then the next thing that I used was the Mark Klemic audios. Don't know why I didn't listen to these sooner. I said this in my NCLEX vlog. I didn't know why I didn't listen to those sooner. They were amazing. So if you don't know who Mark K or Mark Klemic is, I had never heard of him in school. He is the guy that used to write questions for the NCLEX, and I guess back in the day they came out with a rule that said if you help students study for the NCLEX, you can't also write questions for the NCLEX, which makes a ton of sense. But he decided that he wanted to keep helping students study, which is awesome because he's phenomenal. So he does live, like, in-person lectures that you can pay to go to, which I didn't know about. If I had known about them, I might have looked into it, but I didn't know that was a thing. But his lectures are also available online in the audios. He said, I heard him say it, if anyone wants to be recording these, you can record them and share them with people. So it's legal. It's not illegal. It makes me feel weird to be listening to a lecture that I didn't pay for, but that's what it is. All I did was type in Mark K audios on Google, and the first thing that came up was like a Reddit page. And if you go to the Reddit page, it has a link to the audios. That link will take you to a Google Drive that has all of the recordings from all the lectures. I think there's 12 of them. Don't try and play them from the Google Drive. It'll work for like 2 minutes and then it pauses and doesn't work anymore. Make sure you download them to your computer and then listen to them. They are gold. So I was doing practice questions and I was listening to those. I started listening to those 5 days before my test. If I wouldn't known about them sooner, I would have started listening earlier. I just like didn't realize how wonderful they would be, and they were so helpful. So I totally recommend checking those out. He just has like all these mnemonic devices and ways to remember things, and I said all this in my vlog, but he's seriously the bomb. So if you can get a hold of those audio lectures, I totally recommend listening to them. And if you have time, if you're planning your test out farther, or you're looking into how people are studying and you're watching this like a few months before you take your test, start listening to them now and listen to them over and over again. Like listen to them while you're in your car or just hanging out in your room or whatever, just because the more times you hear it, the more your brain is exposed to the information, the better you're going to retain it. I totally recommend his audios. Those were amazing. The last resource that I used was the Saunders NCLEX-RN test prep book. I'll put a picture of it right here. This book is wonderful. Again, this is one of those things that if I'd had it sooner, got the book like further into my studies, I didn't use it a ton, I would 100% recommend it. Like I said, if you're watching this video and you're a few months out or a month out, or you don't know when your test is and you're just kind of like getting the ball rolling of wanting to study, I would totally recommend this book. It's super helpful. The layout of the way things are written is just way better because it's written in list form, and it just makes it make more sense. Like opposed to a normal textbook where it's paragraphs and like a bunch of random information that you don't care about reading. This just has like exactly what you need, and that's it. No extra like fluff stuff. There's a whole chapter in the front of the book about like what to expect for the NCLEX, how to study for it, to not study the day before your exam. Don't do that. There's a bunch of practice questions throughout every chapter, which is super helpful to like test your knowledge afterwards. And then in the very back end of the book, there's a whole like, I think it's a comprehensive test, and I want to say it was like 100 to 300 questions. I really like that, and I totally recommend that book. I really only used it for areas that I felt like I needed extra support in and extra help in, because obviously you can't go back and read an entire textbook and like reteach yourself all of nursing school. That's just not logical or realistic. If you are studying in advance or have quite a bit of time before your test or whatever the case may be, I do recommend this book. Like I said, it was super helpful to go back to concepts that I felt like I didn't know. If you want to go through and read every chapter, you could. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. I know some people that will read the chapters before they do the test questions. I personally don't like doing that because I feel like I'm only getting the questions right because I just read the content, opposed to like what's actually in my brain, if that makes sense. So I don't know, you could pick and choose what you want, but if I had to rank all the stuff that I use to study for the NCLEX, the first thing, like my number one choice, would be UWorld. Without a doubt. The questions are just so helpful. The rationales are amazing. UWorld all the way. Like, just getting exposure to those questions is super helpful. Number two would be Mark K audios. I think those things were phenomenal. I listened to all of them. I took notes on all of them. They were the best. Number three would be the Saunders book, that NCLEX-RN test prep book. That was super great, especially if you're planning to take yours a little bit farther out and have some time to like really dive into that book. I think it'd be super helpful. And then the last thing, number four, would be Kaplan. I obviously didn't buy Kaplan on my own. I had to buy it through my school, so I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to buy it. I would 100% every day, all day, 5,000 times pick UWorld over Kaplan for test questions. But if you have access to it and you have access to those CAT exams, then I say go for it. That is pretty much what I did to study for the NCLEX. I think I covered everything. This video is like 45 minutes long, so hopefully I covered everything. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it helps you. If you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to reach out on my Instagram or leave me a comment down below, and I'll try and get in touch with you and help you in any way I can. But yeah, UWorld all the way. Mark K audios are the best. And don't study the day before your test. Take a break. Take a chill pill. When you're in the test, do your best to just remain calm. Remember that every question that you're getting is just another opportunity to show your knowledge. It doesn't mean you're failing. People pass at the minimum questions, people pass at the maximum questions, and people pass somewhere in between every day. Don't let the anxiety get to you. Take a break when you need one during the test, and just stay focused and confident and know that you can freaking do this. You've worked 4 years for this. You've studied your butt off. Obviously, I hope you've studied before the test and didn't just go into it not studying at all. But you've worked hard. You can do this. You are capable. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.